Hello, welcome to my show. My name is Tom Russell. I'm your host for Life Without Limits, and it's another exciting night for me because of the guest I have tonight. But before we talk about that, I guess if you're new to the show, I just want to give you an idea about the idea about Life Without Limits because frequently, actually every show that I have, I always bring on guests who have gone through some obstacles in their life that could have derailed anybody. And I just decided that I wanted to bring on those people who were victorious over their circumstances. And it's been amazing over this, oh gosh, it's almost been 2 years now that I've had the show. And it's been a lot of interesting guests that have come through the pike here. And so if any of my guests have helped you along the way, we've done our job. And again, the show isn't about me. It's never about me. It's always about my guests because they're the true champions of the world. And so, also, I want to talk about. I think last week I talked about my website. I finally got it up and running. It was 2 years in the making, and I couldn't find anybody that I felt comfortable with. But I connected with Al Baker, and he is great friends with one of my former guests, Betty Hefner, and he's been helping me a great deal trying to get the website launched, and it's working now. And the website is called lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. So if you're looking for anything about my show, you're going to be able to find that, and you can become a member of my fan club. Believe it or not, that's unusual for me to say something like that, but if you want to be a member or a fan club of my program, then take a look at it, and also my uh, the previous podcast. And if you're interested in getting my two books, Finding Your True North, A Bully Teen's Journey of Hope, or Nowhere Man, you can look on there and order those books. And as far as if you're looking for someone to work with you on getting your website, I encourage you to check with Al Baker. And his email address is albaker, ALBAKER, at pictureride.com. That's PICTURIDE.com. So again, I want to thank you all for coming on my show, and I think today is a special day with my guest tonight, and her name is Sandra Cooze, and she is from Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And I tell you what, I get so many people from so many different countries, and I just enjoy Sandra's accent. It's a combination of, I don't know, Sandra, it's like you're from Germany, but you're also from Canada, and it's just like a combination of both, isn't it?
In a way, yes.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, I really like hearing that. But we're going to talk about her life. But one of the things I want to talk about is going through trauma as a child with sexual abuse and bullying can be considered, I guess, as an excuse for some to choose to be the victim. And each time something happens, many people tend to accept that living of life of oppression and abuse, and like it's going to be their lot in life. That's going to be their destiny. That's going to be their fate. And I guess when we talk about what Sandra has gone through, it's you wouldn't blame her if she fell in that same trap of despair. But she refused. She absolutely refused to travel down that path, and it took many years. It just didn't happen overnight. But she managed to come through on the other end to help others realize their self worth, and that's a big accomplishment. So Sandra, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to give an idea what Sandra's all about. We're going to be talking about her life when she was a lot younger, but we want to also talk about what she's doing with her life and what she does to help other people. She's an intuitive trauma release and self empowerment coach, and I'm going to butcher this. This is Reiki.
Yes, it is.
It's actually got that right. A Reiki master teacher, certified traumatic incident reduction facilitator, and a passionate writer. And her passion and dedication for trauma healing was born as a result of her own traumatic past. And molested as a child, which we're going to go over, bullied in school, and sexually assaulted and raped as a young adult. Sandra felt lost for many years until the unusual request of a friend set her on a path of true healing and transformation. She created the Life Story Transformation Program to empower women to liberate themselves from the grip of trauma, heal from emotional pain, transform limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging behavior. Man, that's so hard to say.
Sorry.
So they can step into their power and discover the amazing, beautiful, and strong women they have always been. There's a lot more with Sandra, but I wanted to I want to let Sandra explain how she got to be where she is based on the traumas that she experienced when she was a young person. But I think it starts with when you were assaulted in a stable when you were young. How did that affect you?
Well, it was at first I had no idea what was happening. I just knew that I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And for quite a while, I suppressed it all. I forgot it until I was reminded of it and everything came rushing back into my mind. So it's really not that it affected me right when it happened, because I was one of the lucky ones and my mother believed me. So she took me out of the situation. And then we never talked about it again in hopes that I would forget. And I did for a while, but when it all came back, that's when it really affected me, when I was about 16 years old.
So when did it happen? When you went in the stable? How old were you then?
I was 12.
You were 12. So you had 4 years of basically putting it on the shelf. So
Pretty
what,
much.
what happened when you were 16 and 17?
When I was 16 in school, we had a class about sexual assault and where to go when we needed help. And they were talking about sexual assault, what it means, what it does, and things like that. And that's when it hit me, and I was like, wow, this happened to me. And I remember I was sitting in class, and all those memories came flooding back, and everything I felt, everything he said, what he did, it all came rushing back into my mind. And I remember one of my classmates, she was sitting next to me and sending me one of those little notes that said, my God, this is so boring. And I wrote back, well, none of it happened to you. And she looked at me like, you? I was like, mm-hmm. She was like, should I go with you somewhere? Do we need to go? She was all over it and wanted to take me to one of those help shelters, the people to help. And I was like,
Yeah.
nah, it's been so long ago. But that was the moment when it came back into my mind, and it stayed in my mind from that
Well, when
on.
when you said stayed in your mind, can you talk about that?
I never talked about it. Well, I did ask my mother once why she never reported him to the police.
Mm.
And she said because she didn't want me to have to go to court and go all over everything again in front of hundreds of people.
Well, how'd you feel about that then?
I wasn't happy with that.
Yeah.
Simply because, yes, I was a child, but I was 12 years old and I knew it was wrong, so it was my body. So she should have given me the choice whether I wanted him to report him or not. Because what I learned that day was when I do something wrong, I have to face the consequences. When an
Mm-hmm.
adult does something wrong, nothing happens. That was one of the big lessons I learned that day, and it took me a while to really get over that.
So, but you and around that same time in your life, you told me that you were bullied relentlessly. What was going on there?
Yes, it must have started like probably a few months after we had this class in school because it was the same class. And out of the blue, they just started spitting spitballs at me and kicking me and calling me names. And one day I was writing a letter to a pen pal, and I told her about a boyfriend that I had, how excited I was, the first one, and he was so nice and everything. And my class stole the letter from my backpack and distributed copies all around the school.
Wow.
Yeah, fun times.
Yeah. Yeah. I always wonder about that because you told me all the things that people are doing to you. Did you feel like you provoked it, or did you start something? I mean, where did
No,
it all come from?
I have absolutely no idea. When we had a class conference because of that letter, they were saying, well, she always sits there like her arms crossed under her breast, pushing up her breasts. I was like, what? That's the reason to bully me? I didn't even realize I did that.
Yeah.
So the stupidest thing, maybe because I was quiet or I was a little older and I just wanted to learn and they didn't want to. They thought it was boring. Who knows? Nope, I was the target. And I
Well,
remember I told my grandma about it and said, I don't want to go to school because the kids are so mean. She was like, just ignore them. They will stop. They didn't.
yeah, of course not. They don't. Once they know that they have uh, they can get in, they just keep going.
Yep.
I know that from past experience on my end and from all the other kids I've been trying to help. They just dig right in. Now the thing is that what really struck me when we first talked about your story was as you got older, you told me that you were assaulted several times, not just once. What can you tell us about that?
Well, just like every young woman, I was dreaming of Prince Charming.
Hmm.
I mean, who wouldn't? We grow up with that image. And so I went on a first date with a guy, and he was nice. We went to an Irish pub, and there were always women walking around with roses in their arms, and they had one for sale, and he bought one for me. And I thought it was the sweetest thing, totally romantic. Until not 5 minutes later, he took my hand and put it on his crotch. And already being traumatized and bullied and being raised to be respectful to a fault. I mean, Germany, post war, the
Hmm.
only thing people had was their mutual respect. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't because it was disrespectful, because it was so ingrained in me. So I stayed until the date was over, left my rose, and never called him again. Then,
So
then
I always wonder about that. It's just like you put yourself in that situation. Looking back now, you knew it was wrong, but I mean, how were you able to go on after that? Because this wasn't the first time.
no. Well, I don't know. I just did. It's kind of weird to answer this question because in that moment, life just went on. I just did continue with my life. Of course, I started having fear of men
Hmm.
from many different angles, but it was just something that slowly built up because what happened to me didn't seem that extreme to me. I mean, trauma is trauma, whether big or small, but to me, it was like, okay, something else. I just got to deal with it and move on, basically.
But you were finding yourself in other situations, right?
Yes.
So what was going on with that?
Well, I was sexually harassed in the workplace.
Hmm.
So the first thing that happened, well, I was working in a hotel. I was studying hotel business. And I loved it. I loved the service industry, dreamt of running my own hotel someday. Oh, that never came to pass.
Yeah.
But the first thing that happened that really startled me was there was a cleaning crew that was hired to help with the rooms during the exhibition season. And I always was kind to people. When I walked by, I always nodded and smiled and went on my way. And one of the guys from the cleaning crew thought this as an invitation. So one day he grabbed me and wanted to kiss me, and I was like, whoa, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
So, and this really confused me because I was like, how am I supposed to be nice to people when if I smile, they think I invite them for who knows what?
Yeah.
That really startled me. And then when I did my time in the hotel restaurant, there was one waiter who was horrible. I don't know how else to say that. He was on a regular basis coming into changing rooms when he knew I was changing. When I asked him to leave, he just stood there, arms crossed against an armoire, watching with a smirk on his face. One time I was in a ladies' room, my mother called, and he brought the phone into the ladies' room and handed it to me under the stall. Yes, but I've never told anyone because time and time again it was proven to me that it's not going to do any good. I'm not going to get any help. So it was just like, please let this time in the restaurant be over.
So how did you end up? I mean, when you get in those situations, how did that make you feel as a person, as a woman?
Pretty insignificant and low, and I wouldn't say dirty because it was nothing I did, but
Right.
it made me feel like an object,
Hmm.
like something you just use and discard. And I don't know, I didn't really feel like a woman. I felt like in Germany we call it a little mount of sorrow.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's how I felt. Yes, I was just like wherever I turned for love, I was abused and rejected basically.
So you had a really difficult time developing any kind of relationship. Probably the trust issue had to be the biggest thing, right?
Yep,
Yeah. What
pretty
their intentions
much.
are. Yeah.
And this turned into me sabotaging all my relationships and not realizing that I was doing that.
Hmm. How did you make it seem like it? How did you know that it wasn't your fault?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't saying it's my fault, but I was also questioning why this always happened to me.
Hmm.
So it took a while for me to realize that it wasn't my fault. I had to get to this point, but I think every trauma survivor has to get to this point.
Now, is it the culture different in Germany, where like in the United States, obviously it's the Me Too campaign now is just huge, obviously. But back in your day and back in my day, was just everything was shoved underneath the carpet. Was that the way it was in Germany?
Oh my goodness, don't say anything. What would the neighbors think? Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Still to this day. So
Mm,
the moment I told my mom that I'm going to make this my business, she was like, "What would your husband say if your neighbor talks to you about this?" I was like,
mm.
"So what?" Yes, Germany was the same way.
Yeah. Well, how did your husband feel? He knows everything going on. What you went through, right?
He knows a lot, but not
Yeah.
everything. And so far, he hasn't read my book, so his father knows more about me than he does.
Ooh.
Yes,
Yeah. Just wait
but
till he reads it.
yep, I encourage him, but we'll see. But yeah, he is proud of me. He's supporting me. He is. I remember the first time I openly talked about what really happened because I was going on on a radio show for the first time talking about it. And I had like a little script because I was so nervous. And I told him, "Here, can you read this?"
Hmm.
And he read it, put the paper down, looked at me, and just came over and embraced me. And
Wow.
this was the most genuine embrace I've ever received from anyone. And that was just beautiful.
That's great to hear. If you have a spouse that supports you,
Yeah.
particularly when you lay your soul out there for other people to listen to, that's got to be such a tremendous comfort with for you because you don't have to worry about what your spouse is thinking, whether you think that you're you know laying it out there for everyone to hear.
That's very true. And it gave me a lot of courage to really pursue my future.
So how do you turn that around? When you felt like you weren't worthy, where you know that you felt that you deserved to have a successful relationship.
Well, first, I didn't realize that I was sabotaging it. I just thought they were all just cheaters out to get me, and no one really loves me. So, the usual, I guess. But there was the last boyfriend that I had before I met my husband. He gave me a huge piece of the puzzle. We were together for 2 months, and I remember I was constantly needy. Like I always wanted to be close to him because I was always looking for that one person who would marry me. So I would be loved for the rest of my life and don't have to worry about finding the right one because I was just exhausted from constantly falling in and out of love.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I've just been married to a woman with mental issues. I don't want to have another one in my life. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't say this mean. It was matter of factly. And so this made me think. And for the first time, I was looking at myself and the relationships. And that's when I started to see the pattern of what I was doing. Like always sabotaging it, always starting out great, but as soon as it gets a little more serious, I'm just start doubting and questioning and seeing issues where there aren't any. And that was very eye-opening. And for the first time, I said, okay, I don't want to have the perfect relationship. I want to be perfect for myself and ready for a relationship.
Now the thing is you, from the conversation we're having right now, it doesn't seem like you were trying to consult with someone else to help you deal with this. Is that right, or did you try to?
I tried after I was raped in my mid-20s. I went to see a psychologist, and because I didn't like the way the person I had become. I didn't like to be depressed, anxious, being afraid, not going anywhere. I just wanted to be happy again. So I went to a psychologist and he listened to me for an hour about everything was going on. And after the session was done, he said, okay, I believe you've worked through it all. What am I supposed to do? That was the only time I really reached out to anyone for help.
Doesn't sound like it helped.
No, it was like,
No,
I just like, okay, I give up. I had hit rock bottom that day and I was like, that's it. I give up. But
but there. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
the thing is when you give up, once you say I give up, you open the doors to the actual healing to come in. At least that's how it was for me because I wasn't searching for help anymore. I was just like, you know what? Fine. If that's how it is, then that's how it is.
So it's more self healing than going outside to try to find help.
Yes, because then you have to really focus on yourself rather than searching for someone else to pull the trauma out of you,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't work anyways.
All right.
You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, but then I was ready for it because I knew I didn't want to be that person anymore. And the counselor really did nothing, not in the slightest. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
I
One
was
of the
good.
things that I find interesting with the guests that I have is they've been on other podcasts quite a bit, or they shared their stories in speaking engagements and things like that. And obviously, you've done your share of podcasts, and I'm sure you've been in a group of a lot of other women are going through similar things. When you share your story, is it cathartic for you to share it? Do you find yourself removed a little bit from your story?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But just because it's no longer a part of my life.
yeah,
I was really for a while questioning why I don't feel this. Wow, you've been through all that? Like what
hmm
I always hear from podcast moderators. Like, oh
yeah,
my goodness, your story is so powerful. And I was like, I don't feel that. But of course I don't because it's no longer part of my life.
hmm
It used to be, yes, but now it's sometimes I feel I'm telling someone another person's story and I have to remind myself, no, this is mine.
Well, I think the biggest thing is you've drawn on the strength, your strength versus your weaknesses, and that is the overlying thing that a lot of people have when they really get over things
Mhm.
is they focus on the things that make them stronger, and the more you tell your story in the presence of strength, you can say just about anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I really
Um,
like that.
we also had a discussion about, you know how long it's been since we talked. we
I
talked
know.
we talked a long time ago, so I'm just trying to remember everything. But you talked about the paper cut theory. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It's something that just popped into my mind a few months ago when I tried to explain trauma, how it works in the body. So when, let's say, we open a letter that we're really excited to get to see what's inside, and we cut our finger on the paper, and the finger is bleeding. So what do? We hold it under running water, clean it, put a band-aid on it, forget about it. Unless we have to cut onions. That's
Yeah,
painful.
yeah,
Yes, but it's just a paper cut is the most annoying wound you can have. And yet, the moment the paper cut into your finger became traumatized. Your body is traumatized, and yet You don't have a care in the world. You go on with your life. You're never terrified of ever touching paper again. You don't ever go back to the moment you cut your finger and go over it and over it in your mind, because you know the body is healing the finger. It will heal it, scab is going to grow, done. In a couple days, you don't even see it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But with emotional trauma, we stay stuck in the story. We go over it again and again and again to find the reason why this had to happen. We never ask twice why we got a paper cut. And yet, the body is self-healing. For the body, it doesn't matter if it's a paper cut, a broken bone, a new kidney, or emotional trauma. Healing is healing for the body. The body just knows healing is needed. But with emotional trauma, we stay stuck in the story. If we didn't stay stuck in the story and allowed the body to do what it's supposed to do, we would overcome the trauma so fast because the body would heal itself. But by staying stuck in a story, it's the same as if you would just peel off the scab from the paper cut over and over again. Because we are not allowing ourselves to let it go.
Well, I think a lot of people define themselves based on their trauma because I can't remember who I was talking to. I've talked to so many different people. It's like when something bad happens to them, that's where they get the attention, um, good or bad. I mean that because that's where they feel like they need to uh, uh, be put in a position where people will recognize that you're going through the pain, and that's how they want to live their life. And it's just a constant battle. And I like that idea about the paper cut theories because a lot of people decide that the scab or the paper cut is better than actually trying to heal.
Yeah, but that has a lot of different issues. It's self-esteem, self-love, the need to be in control. I mean, when we're being traumatized, we lose our sense of control. We have control taken away from us. So when people are saying, okay, something bad has to happen, so people pay attention to me, so they're trying to control when people can pay attention to them because they
Mm-hmm.
think this is the only way they get attention. But that's a trauma speaking because I'm fully healed and I don't have any issue getting attention from my husband, my son, my friends if I feel I need it, but in a positive, empowering way. So it's really, we always have to look in the childhood. What happened in the childhood up to the trauma, where they feel that something bad has to happen in order for them to get the attention they need. Just, oh, poor baby, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it feels good because we get attention, we feel we get love, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's not love. Most of the time, it's, I wouldn't say pity, but let's say compassion. But it's not love.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere where someone started talking about some kind of trauma in their life, and someone asked that question, and her family was there, and as soon as she started talking about it, then they all got up to get a cup of coffee because they did not want to be around it to hear it one more time. That sounds bad, but I mean, until you recognize that what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
you're affecting other people
Yep.
by talking about it. I'm not a counselor or a psychologist, but to be around that can wear on other people. So I guess you have to be considerate of that. Now, when after you felt like you've turned the corner and everything, you decided to stop looking at yourself and try to help other people. How did that journey happen?
Well, it was really good question. um, well, my journey was very spiritual. I mean, I'm a Reiki master, so I got into Reiki, learned all about energy, and it definitely was a piece of the puzzle to help me heal. But when I started my business in spirituality, something was missing. Like the actual key aspect of my business was me, I was missing from my business. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was also very spiritual, and I don't know what happened, but she is really good. And at some point, I was bawling my eyes out telling her my
Mm,
story.
yeah.
Felt so embarrassed, really talking about it for the first time ever to someone. And she said, That. That is your business. Your story is what will change lives. And I thought about that for a bit. And before I knew it, I built my whole business around my story and started to feel more comfortable sharing it because I realized my story means something.
Hmm.
Before that, I thought, well, this happened to me. Who cares what happened to me? But then I realized, no, my story can really help someone else. And that's how I started to grow into myself, I guess.
Well, yeah, but you had to come up with a program, right? I mean, you can only tell your stories so many times, so many
Yes.
different ways. But I mean, you have to have some kind of a program. And I was reading some of the stuff you've done. You started this thing called the Rock Salad Relationship Program. What is that?
The Rock Solid Relationship Program is a program for couples, and it is based on trauma healing because when two people fall in love and they get married, start a family, they're still two people with their own pasts. So let's say the woman, for example, is brought up to be a good wife, a good cook, taking care of the husband, and the husband is brought up to go to work and come home, eat dinner, and then relax. So the usual,
Hmm. Yeah.
unfortunately, even in this household.
Don't tell them
um,
that.
and so after a while, the wife is trying to make the husband happy and cooks delicious foods, but she needs the recognition. But her husband doesn't because he was never taught to say thank you for the amazing meal to his wife.
Hmm.
Because we are being trained to act this way. We see from our parents how they react with our father, mother, and we
Right.
behave the same way. But with we have two different people from two different, complete different families, different backgrounds, and that at some point will clash. Then we have the past traumas, whether big or small. At some point, they're going to get triggered and they have heated arguments, and they have no idea why they're constantly yelling at each other. And then I think it's their own fault, and then the marriage breaks apart because they cannot communicate.
Hmm.
So my program is designed to help them understand where their issues come from, release those triggers from the previous traumas, and to turn those arguments into empowering conversations.
And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do because I've been married almost 32 years now, and I'm I basically I suck at some of it. What you're talking about, because take my wife for granted sometimes. But I do know that when she gets upset or I get upset, there's some underlying thing that really
Exactly.
creates the problem, and that's the hard thing to do is get go into it deeper. Why are we actually we're not you know why are you arguing because you put the dishes in the dishwasher incorrectly? Although it's annoying, but that's not what the real problem
Mm-mm.
is.
Yep.
So after 32
Yeah.
years, I still put the dishes in incorrectly, so I can't win.
Well,
Um,
I don't help the couples with their dishes,
yeah.
but I help them to understand when they're being triggered and how to help their spouse figure out what the trigger is, like actually be the rock, like ask the right questions to help the spouse unravel why they're actually being triggered and then help them through it. So I basically coach them into being their coach at this very moment.
Hmm.
And doing this for one another is so empowering. It is so beautiful when I work with couples and they first and foremost understand it's not each other at all. This you should see the relief on their faces.
Yeah.
That it's not something they do. And then we go deeper and see, okay, where's this coming from? And it's most of the time it's a previous relationship
Hmm.
or from home upbringing because their beliefs are completely different from their spouse.
Hmm.
And so we unravel those beliefs and say, okay, now you start your own. Start fresh. Build your own. Ask the difficult questions. For example, we always want to make our spouse happy, but we never ask what actually makes them happy.
Mm.
And then when we think what makes them happy and they say, no, it didn't do anything for me, we get triggered because we feel like a horrible spouse because we weren't able to make them happy.
Right.
And yet we don't ask, well, what actually makes you happy so I can make you happy? We don't want to hear the answer because it may be something completely different from what we believed, and then we feel horrible.
You are telling me things that I don't want to hear, but I completely understand. Now we did talk about trauma, but you talked to me about the one of the other things you talked about is traumatic incident reduction.
Yes.
What's that?
Traumatic incident reduction, I think, is probably the best kept secret in trauma healing because it's amazing but no one has ever heard about it. It's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around since the 80s. It is similar to EMDR, eye movement desensitization, in the sense that it's trigger release. But this is like um, a session sequence where the facilitator asks specific questions to gradually bring triggers to the surface and release them. So it's very gentle, but it's quick, which means you can release one traumatic incident no matter how far in the past it is in 5 to 6 sessions, and it's gone for good. It was specifically designed for people with trauma and especially PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen amazing results in my clients. It's incredible how fast they changed and transformed their lives after a handful of sessions.
Well, it's got to be difficult because when people open up about their trauma for the first time, and again, it goes back to having them go back to the way they felt before because that's the lane that they are in. How do you stop somebody from falling back to that?
Because the way the questions are being asked, they look at the trauma. They're not in it. They look at it like a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a TR facilitator, I'm specifically trained not to get triggered, not to get emotional. So it doesn't matter what story I hear, I do not get triggered. Because I have clients several who came to me and said, well, I triggered my counselor and I had to help my counselor calm down during my session.
Really?
Yes. So what does that tell to a trauma survivor? My story is too hard to handle for even a counselor,
Mm.
and they give up. So in TIR, we're specifically trained, no matter what we hear, we don't get triggered, we don't show any emotion. We are here to hold the space.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone makes a huge difference because for the client, it helps them to ease into it, to know, okay, this person can help me, this person can handle my story. And then they ease into it and they welcome the release. Usually the first session sequence is a little difficult because it's a different concept with the questions. It's different from therapy. But once they're through the first one, they can't wait to continue and get the rest out of the system too because it's really so fast. And I absolutely love this modality.
Yeah. Now I work with kids organization called Five Star Life. One of the things that we always start fresh every year, and one of the big challenges that we have is to gain trust, to allow them to pour out their lives to us, but it takes a while to do that. How are you able to gain that trust with someone you just connect with?
Through my story.
Mm.
Because I
Me?
can, whatever they tell me, I can tell them I've experienced something similar. And I came out on the other side. For most people, only hearing that someone went through it and is on the other side of it and knows how amazing it feels to be free of the trauma, that's the only incentive they need to know it's possible.
Now, why do people hold on to that trauma?
Different reasons.
Mm.
Some people, if it's been very long that they had the trauma, they may not know who they are without it. They may not think that there is another way because they're like, well, been brought up like, well, this happened to me too, suck it up. Or that's how it is, just get over it, it's okay, deal with it. Or they have it suppressed so well that they don't even realize something is still there. Usually, when people suppress and they realize that there is trauma, is when they when they want to be happy and they realize they feel empty inside. Because you cannot suppress the bad without suppressing the good.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work this way. If you're happy, the trauma comes up too. Of course, because it has to come up to be released. And as soon as you're happy, you open the floodgates and then all hell breaks loose. But if you work on that and you can be happy and without worrying about negativity, I can feel whatever I want to feel without the fear of a trigger coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And if a trigger comes up, I know exactly how to handle it, how to work through it.
Now, how do you, is a lot of it, people have a difficult time explaining what it is because they're fearful of what other people may think of them?
Yeah, fear of judgment, fear of being ridiculed, fear of not being taken seriously, just fear in general, fear of that their worst nightmares come true, that people say, yeah, so what?
Mm-hmm.
Been there, done
Yeah,
that.
and I think what you think, how people are going to react to it, a lot of times is entirely different than
Mm-hmm.
what actually does happen. In fact, there'll be
Yes.
more people supporting because it's, well, I didn't know anything about you, that you were going through that because and then they feel like it's such a huge release that they're able to do this without that judgment.
Mm-hmm. That's how I felt the first time I was publicly speaking about my journey, and I had such a positive response, and I was so nervous, didn't know what to expect, but yes, people were so supportive. It was amazing, and it really gave me the last step that I need to really fully embrace this part of my life.
Now we talked about your story with. I mean, you went through the abuse when you were a young person, and then through high school, and then as you got older, all these men abused you. How do you find a level of forgiveness throughout all this?
Well, I've learned on my journey that forgiveness has nothing to do with the people who abused me
Mm-hmm.
and everything with myself. For me, forgiveness is allowing myself to let it go, choosing for myself to be free of it, because I realized at some point that I was the one who was holding myself hostage. Not my abusers. They're probably completely forgotten about me, moved on, who knows what. I have no idea. I don't care. But for me, I was holding on to it. So I had to allow myself to let it go. And the thing is, so many people say that they will never forgive because their abusers don't deserve forgiveness. Exactly, they don't. I completely agree.
Right.
But by holding on to that, holding them hostage, they're not, yeah, they're angry at themselves too. They don't allow themselves to move on. And with that, they will never find peace. And just because they find peace doesn't mean what happened loses the severity. No, it will always be horrible what happened, inexcusable, always. But we are have the right to let it go for our sake.
But it's an emotion that you when you say you forgive yourself. I mean, when you say that you forgive yourself, how I always wonder about that. It's because you always you just can't turn it off like a sink faucet. You just can't turn that forgiveness on and off. It just has to come deep within you, and it's just like the angst, the anxiety is released from you. How do you get to that point?
You release the triggers.
Mm.
The fear, the anxiety, it's all just triggers. And once you release them, they're gone and you feel at peace.
Mm.
It sounds cheesy, but that's really how it is. You feel at peace because there's nothing left that traumatizes you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good place to be, and I've learned that a long time ago. I have never gone through what you've gone through or what most of my guests have gone through, but there are certain levels of forgiveness that I try to put in my life because I just can't hang on to it.
Hmm.
But with all of them, you learn everything. I always ask this, but you heard this, I'm sure. You ought to write a book, Sandra. You ought to be able to get out there and do it. And lo and behold, you did. Can you talk about that book?
Sure. Well, my book is book one of a trilogy. I'm currently working on the second one, and it's called Journey to Yourself: How to Heal from Trauma, written by someone who did. And this book is, I guess it falls under the category self-help memoir or teaching
Mhm.
memoir. Because first and foremost, it's my story, but then I use my story to demystify trauma. So I really look at trauma from every angle: what it is, what it does, what has to happen to release it. And I added space for notes, exercises, and like journaling prompts and everything. So really a guidebook to help someone who's ready to heal, truly heal from trauma. And I've heard so much positive feedback from it already, and it's only been out a couple months, and I'm really excited about it.
Mhm. How did it feel writing it? Because I know when I've written my memoir, I'm still working on it. It's just you, you, you try to walk away from all the things you went through, but now you got to put it on paper or a computer, and now you got to do all that. How did it feel when you got in that journey of writing all that?
Well, when I started actually writing down my journey and going into the depth of it, it was intimidating.
Yeah.
It didn't really trigger me that much, but purposefully going into everything that I felt because I wanted to be as honest as possible with my story. And it was hard, even though I
Yeah.
had already healed, but it was hard.
Yeah.
But then again, I can say I'm proud of myself for really going through with this. And I like how my story turned out, how it was written. I mean, it's gentle, it's compassionate, but it's still honest.
Well, Sandra, your journey is just beginning. I mean, even though you've gone through a lot and you're doing a lot to help others, man, you got so much more going for you. So I appreciate you coming on my show. I really liked it.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think we
That's
covered everything.
okay. Well, I always ask that question because if there's something we didn't cover, but like I said at the beginning of before we even talked with the show, we had a lot to go over. I think we got to a lot. So thank you so much for coming on my show, and I hope that the message that you have is you can survive trauma, but it takes some work, and you have to do that.
Yes, but it's definitely doable and it's a beautiful journey.
Yeah,
I
it
can tell
is.
you that.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on my show. And just as a reminder again, if you're interested in taking a look at my website, it's lifewithoutlimitsshow.com. And there's a lot of things going on there. And also my YouTube channel, I got that going on. I have about 11 videos on there. You just look for Life Without Limits, Thomas Russell, and you're going to find a bunch of my previous shows on there. And it's been exciting, and things are happening with my show, and there's some other things going to be happening that I won't be able to get into just yet, but when it happens, I'll let all of you know. So as I end all my shows, I want everyone to smile infectiously, laugh genuinely, love unconditionally, and live courageously. I believe in all of you. I believe all of you are created to do something spectacular with your life, but it's not going to happen unless you make it happen. And I promise you, if you put forth the effort and you put forth the desire that you cannot remain in status quo with your life, things will change for you. But you have to get out of that comfort zone because if you don't, you're going to be wallowing in just that status quo life. And I guarantee you, that's what I did at age 52, when I wrote my first book. I got tired of that. And I don't want anybody who is young at heart and young in age to think that they don't deserve it. But you do. You honestly do. You have this power to accomplish so many different things, but you have to get out there and do it. And I promise you it'll work, and because I believe in you. So have a great week, folks.
The pain and the truth I wear like a battle wound, so ashamed.